Hey guys, thanks for joining me for another episode of Learn to Play Games. My name is Lance, and today we're going to take a look at a brand new game coming to Kickstarter called Rise of Nobility. This is a game that is being put out by Final Frontier Games. Some of you may have backed their first Kickstarter, Cavern Tavern, and so this takes place in the same universe. This is a 2 to 5 player game that takes roughly an hour to 2 hours to play. It is a resource management game, and all the players are working against each other to gain the most victory points to be the overall winner at the end of the game. So in the game itself, it is set in a fantasy realm in their universe, and each of the players is playing a lord who is trying to build up their settlements to basically get the king's attention and have him select your settlement as the next kingdom. So players are going to do a number of different things, gathering different resources to hire different settlers from different races to gain victory points, and then being able to use those settlers to do different things to gain more victory points. And so the players will accumulate those in various ways, and there's a lot of different strategies to it. So the game itself, there isn't a real steep learning curve to this one, which is nice. Depending upon different resource management games you've played, some of them are super heavy and some of them are light. I would put this one somewhere in the middle, as players will probably take a turn or two to kind of get the hang of the overall game. And it does have a good ramping system, as initially all you're going to be mainly doing is gathering resources and kind of building yourself up, hiring different settlers and doing things like that. And then as the game progresses, then you're going to kind of start branching out into some of those different areas later in the game that will give you more victory points and have higher costs and things like that that you'll be able to take care of at that point, as early in the game you just won't have the resources or the nobility to actually do it. So my feelings on this game so far, I do enjoy worker placement games from time to time, and of course with this one being a fantasy setting, that grabbed my attention right away. On top of that, they actually came out with a novel for the game to kind of immerse you in the realm and give you a good idea of some of the backstory and connect the two games, the Cavern Tavern being the first game and then this one being the second. So this novel kind of pieces it all together and shows you some backstory, introduced some characters from the first game. And I did have a good time reading that. It was a good read. It was 90 pages, so it went pretty quick. I was able to do it in an afternoon, and it does kind of give you a good setting for the game. It's not required, of course. If you just want to play the game, you can play the game, but if you enjoy some of the backstory and kind of immersing yourself into the setting of the game, that is definitely a book I would recommend picking up, especially if you enjoyed the first game and you're looking at backing the second game. So on top of that, like I said, I do enjoy resource management games, and I felt that this one kind of fell in the middle of the road as far as difficulty, which was nice because I could introduce it to players that weren't super strategic, and players that definitely enjoyed some of that more heavy strategy as well, myself being one of them. And I felt that it met the needs of all of them, and it wasn't super hard to teach and pick up on. Like I said, after a couple turns, everybody seemed to have a pretty good idea how the game went, and as the rounds went by, you started seeing players develop their own strategies and developing different ways to accomplish different things, which was interesting to see how each player tackled that. So on top of that, the other thing I'd like to point out real quick is that this is just a prototype. None of these items are final. And if you guys backed the first Kickstarter and you're familiar with Cavern Tavern, you know the company puts out a good product. Everything was well put together. The artwork was good. The materials that they used were top notch. The game was really nice and polished, and it played really well. So I would expect the same from this one. And playing it a couple times myself, I definitely had a good time with it. And like I said, if you do like worker placement games, I would recommend checking it out and giving it a look. It's definitely worth your time and effort. So definitely consider backing this if you guys are interested in this kind of a game. And I'm going to go ahead and take you through some of the components of the game, show you how the player's turn works, show you the first turn of the game so you guys can kind of see how the game plays a little bit. And as always, if you have questions about it, please feel free to ask them, and I will do my best to answer them. So let's go ahead and head to the table, and I'll teach you guys how to play. For player setup, each player is going to receive a player dashboard, which is going to have a bunch of information on it. At the top of the dashboard are 6 different houses where you can store the different resources that you'll gather throughout the game. And each one is color coordinated with the particular resource that you can get. From there, then you have slots for your houses that you can build. And in order to build a house, you must have a house on your deck. So there's a spot for the house to be placed on the deck, and then there's also a spot for your workers to be placed when you get workers that are waiting to go and do work. Finally, you're also going to notice these yellower areas there where you can build the community centers. Each time you build one, you'll receive 5 victory points and 2 nobility points on the nobility track, which we're going to take a look at later. Finally, going along the edge is your reputation, which each player will start on the 9 slot. From there, then you're going to go ahead and choose a color, and you'll get the meeples of that color. You'll get 5 dice, 7 houses, which you'll always start the game with 1 house on deck, and 3 scoring tokens. One of those will go on the 9 slot, and the other 2 I'll show you where they go later. Then all players are going to start with 8 gold coins and a quick reference guide. From there, you can go ahead and shuffle up the player cards and go ahead and deal each player a random card. These cards are going to give each player a little bit of a special ability. So at the top of the card is going to be one of the 6 resources, and that character is allowed to spend 1 additional resource when purchasing a settler, which we're going to show in a little bit. On top of that, each lord is also going to have a special ability at the bottom of his card, and when a player reaches level 5 and becomes a lord, his ability will take effect immediately, and that player will gain any abilities there. Finally, each player is going to be dealt 1 settler card from the level 1 settler stack. On the settler cards, there's going to be a bunch of different information. The first is the name of that type of settler, or which race they're from. And then in the corner here, you're going to notice there are 2 arrows. There's a blue arrow with a number in it, and a red arrow with a number in it. The red arrow is the minimum amount of resources that you must spend to purchase these settlers, and the blue arrow is the most you can spend. And the resources you must spend are listed at the bottom of the card, so red and blue. So each resource, you must spend at least 1 of that resource, and the maximum number of resources you can spend of that type are 3. Unless your character card has the picture of one of the resources listed, then you can spend up to 4. And finally, when you purchase that settler, based on the number of resources you spend is the number of victory points you get up to its max, and you will also benefit from the benefits on the side. So this one shows 2 meeples, so you would gain 2 workers in your worker zone. If it showed a star, then you would also be able to raise your nobility 1 point for that, which is shown with these guys here with the community buildings as well. Now we're going to go ahead and take a look at board setup and the features of the board. So we're going to start on one end of the board and work our way over. So the first thing we're going to talk about is the shipyard. So you're going to have a stack of ship tokens, and you're going to go ahead and mix those up and place them somewhere near the ship, and then flip over the first one. Now during players' turns, they can spend a dice to go into the ship, and you spend their resources to gain coins based on the resource that's pictured. So depending upon the dice number you put is the number of resources you can spend up to, and each resource you spend will get you the gold that's listed. So if you spend 2 blue cubes, each blue would get you 2 golds. If you spend a yellow cube, you'll get 3. And you can only spend the maximum of the cubes pictured, so only 1 player can sell 1 yellow cube. And you would go ahead and dock it there and get the coins. From there, then you'll also notice there's numbers 1 to 10, and that is the number of turns that are in the game. And so you'll mark it with a little ship meeple on the section for 1. At the top here, you're going to notice that we have the Cavern Tavern, and you're going to go there to purchase settler cards. At the beginning of the game, you're going to go ahead and shuffle up your settler deck, and then place out 6 settler cards near the top of the board with that. Next, we have the 6 different guilds. Each guild specializes in a particular resource, and each guild works the same way. So let's go ahead and take a look at the yellow guild here, and we're going to go ahead and take a look at the breakdown. So there are 3 different areas, as you can see with these white lines, that highlight areas that players can purchase upgrades for and lock into those areas, and then they'll gain the benefits listed in that area. Underneath that, Each section, there are 3 different sections broken down, and each section is represented by 2 different dice values. So when a player spends a dice of those values, they will put it into that slot, and no other player can use that spot during the turn. From there, then that player can choose to purchase goods based on the slot that they chose. So, for example, if a player spends a 1 or 2 dice, they could purchase 1 good from that area and then place 1 or 2 meeples in the bottom section here, which we're going to cover in just a second. If they placed a 3 or 4, they could purchase up to 2 goods and place 1 of their meeples in that area. And if they spent 5 or 6 good dice, then they could buy up to 3 goods in that area. Finally, at the bottom, players can lock their meeples in there that are waiting to be put into working areas. And each meeple that is in an area, when a player goes in there, will grant them 1 additional good on top of any goods that they purchase. So let's go ahead and take a look at an example of this. We'll go ahead and say that the blue player has taken his turn and has placed a blue meeple there. And then he spends a dice with a 4 value and spends 2 gold, which each good is going to cost the player 1 gold. So he's going to go ahead and spend 2 gold to get 2 resources. So he would get 2 yellow cubes plus an additional yellow cube because he has a worker in that area. In the middle of the board, you have 2 different areas. The first one is the clerk's office, which will allow you to get modifier tokens, which will let you modify a dice value 1 point up or 1 point down on that dice. Over here, we have the White Castle. And again, based on which dice you spend in there, is the number of reputation points you'll gain for that area. And then moving over to the end board over here, we have the Stone Council. So at the beginning of the game, you're going to go ahead and shuffle up your tokens for that and go ahead and place them out in each of the different squares. Once you're done with that, then that area is done. And again, just like any other area, depending upon the dice that you lock, will go along the grid, and you must secondly have a settler of that type completed in order to use it. And these will be used later on in the game to gain you victory points. And basically how they work is each one is going to show which level you must be on. So again, over here we have the nobility track, and players will work their way up. And the first time they reach the purple shield, that is when their lord level. And then if they reach the white shield, that is their white lord level. Anything above that will gain them victory points at the end of the game. So each of these tiles is going to list either the purple or the white shield, which again will be corresponding to your nobility. And then from there, you'll have to spend the resources that are listed on the token to gain the victory points that are listed above it. And each time you use this, it's going to drop your reputation by 1 point. And again, you must have the particular race completed in your spot in order to use these. Finally, at the very bottom of the card is the guild hall. And so at the beginning of the game, you're going to go ahead and shuffle up your guild tokens and place them out 1 in each of the slots below the dice. During the game, you can lock a dice in one of these spots and pay the gold for that slot to take that token. And there are 2 different types. There are the green tokens, which are going to correspond to one of the 6 different guilds, and they'll be represented by the flag. And then there are community tokens, which, as you guys remember from the player board, will be locked on the player board and will gain an additional victory point each time you complete a settler card after you have one of these tokens. One other thing is when you purchase one of these tokens, if you purchase it for a guild, you must have a worker down below in order to do it. So let's go ahead and say that our blue player had a worker down here and spent the 10 gold and the 1 dice to purchase this. So it would go into the first slot. He would gain 3 nobility points and 7 victory points. And then his worker would be placed on that token. Up here, we also have the construction yard. And so when a player docks a dice up there, they will be able to purchase a house for 5 gold. And that will allow them to place that house on their worker on the dock and ready to be placed, which we're going to take a closer look at later. Rise to Nobility is played over 10 rounds, with each round broken into a number of turns that the players will take. So I'm going to go ahead and take you guys through that real quick. And I've gone ahead and set up the game for a 3-player game. And there's a bunch of reference cards for the number of players. So we're using the 3-player reference card. And so it has a couple of key points on it that I'm going to go through. So it says only 2 of the 3 dice slots on each guild are available. Once 2 of these slots are filled, the remaining slot is unavailable for the rest of the round. What this means is that each guild has 3 slots you can place dice. When 2 of those slots have been taken by players, the 3rd slot will not be able to be used for this since we're only playing a 3-player game. There are 3 available apprentice slots in each guild, so down at the bottom of each guild we had the 5 apprentice slots, so in a 3-player game only 3 spots are open. And then at the beginning of each round, as shown below, you're going to receive a number of gold coins based on the number of apprentices that are in that slot. And basically what this means is as players place their guys there, at the beginning of the next round, based on the number of meeples that are in that space, so 1 meeple would get 3 gold, 2 meeples would get 2 gold, and 3 meeples would get 1 gold each. And so if we had our purple player here as well, then each of our players would receive 2 gold. If we only had the blue, he would receive 3, and if there was 3 meeples here, each one would only get 1 gold. The last thing before we start the game is the score track. So the Rise of Nobility score track. So at the beginning of the game, each player will place their color token in that slot. And this will be kept off screen so you guys won't actually be able to see it. From here, then each player can go ahead and roll a dice to see who goes first. Wow. Okay, so we'll try again. All right, so purple will be the first player, so he'll get the first player token, and he'll be able to take his turn first. From here, then all players are going to go ahead and roll their dice and keep the values as shown. Okay. Now what this means is that the players will spend these dice values in the different areas to gain resources and do different things. Now the one thing to keep in mind though is that players cannot spend more than their total dice value based on their reputation. So all our players started at 9, so we can't exceed 9 points of dice on our reputation. So for example, our blue player could spend 2 4s and a 1 to equal 9, or he could spend 2 4s and then he couldn't spend any of the other 2 because they would break over his 9 reputation. So from here we're going to go ahead and start, and so the purple player is going to go first. And so he is going to take a look at his green elves card, and it needs blue and white. So he's going to go ahead and go after some white cubes. So he's going to go ahead and spend a 5, and he'll place it in that 5 slot, and then he's going to spend 3 gold to gain 3 white cubes. 1 cube per gold that he spent. From there, the only other thing he can do during his turn is purchase a settler, which he can't because he doesn't have the resources needed yet. So then we will go to the next person's turn, which is blue. So blue's going to go ahead and spend a 4 to increase his reputation by 2 points. So now his reputation is 11. Going on to green. Green's going to go ahead and do the same thing, but he's going to get 3 points. So that bumps him up to 12, and we'll go back over to purple. Purple's going to go ahead and spend a 2 now to get a blue guy. So he can only purchase 1 guy for that, so he'll trade in his 5 and get 4 coins back and 1 blue cube. At this point, he does have enough cubes to purchase that, as he has at least 1 cube in each of the 2 colors he needs, which is blue and white. So he can spend up to 3 cubes of one type or any deviation of that. And so his minimum is 2 cubes and his maximum is 4. So he's going to go spend all 4 so that he gets 4 points on his track. So he's up 4 points to the other players. And then he's going to go ahead and he'll receive the rewards for the card. So he gets 2 meeples. And he'll move his house into one of the empty slots. Now you cannot complete a settler's card if you don't have a house in your house slot. So at this point, if he went and got another group of settlers, he would have to purchase a house from the construction yard in order to be able to complete them. And he's also spent 7 points of dice, so he only can spend 2 more points during his next turn, so the only dice he could use is the 1. So moving back over to blue now, he's going to go ahead and start getting some of his stuff, so he's going to spend another 4 and go here to purchase 2 brown cubes. Going over to green, green is going to go ahead and spend... He's going to go ahead and spend his 3 to go here and get 2 white cubes. Going back over to purple, purple can only spend 1 white dice, and he cannot go into the white area as both the 2 spots are taken, and in a 3-player game, when 2 spots are taken, you can't go there. So he's going to go ahead and go up here and go ahead and buy a red cube. Going back over to blue, blue has 8 points out, and his maximum right now is 11, so he could spend 1 more. So let's go ahead and do that. We're going to go ahead and let's go to blue. Oh, which we can't because that spot's taken, so let's go to green. We'll go ahead and buy a green cube. Going back over to green, green has 9 points out, and his max right now is 12, so he can spend 3. So we'll go ahead and do that. We'll go here, and we're going to go ahead and buy 2 with his coins. Going back over to purple, purple now has 9 points out, and his max is 9, so he can't do anything else with his dice, so it's going to go back over to blue. Blue has a total of 9 points out, and he can only have 11, in which he doesn't have any dice that are low enough, so his turn is done. Going over to green, he has 12, which is his cap as well, so that'll end the player's turns. So at this point, then we would go over and move up the turn counter, and then if any players had any apprentices out, which they don't yet, which we could actually do that. Let's go ahead and take it back a little bit. So when our purple player went up here to purchase the red dice, he's going to go ahead and place one of his guys up there in his apprentice slot. I forgot about that those guys were there. So during this phase now, he would gain 3 coins for having an apprentice in that slot. From there, then the first player token will move to the next player, and then all the players would gain all their dice back, and the players would roll again. The shipyard would get rid of its token, and a new token would come into play, and then we would be ready to start the next turn. Well, I hope that it gave you a basic idea how the game plays. As with most resource management games, as the game goes on, other areas are going to become more important, such as the guild hall and the stone council we didn't really touch on in the first turn, but you don't have the resources needed to get into those areas, so later in the game those areas are going to become more important. If you enjoy resource games, I would definitely recommend checking this one out. I had a good time so far with it, and I definitely feel there's plenty of depth and different strategies that players can deploy to become victorious in it. And there's a lot of different ways that players can kind of backstab each other and block each other from gaining different resources and things. So as always, I really appreciate you guys taking the time to watch my videos. If you like what I do and enjoy watching them, please consider subscribing to my channel and liking the video, as it really does make a big difference. And as always, if you guys have any questions, please feel free to leave them in the comment section below, and I'll do my best to answer them. And until next time, I'll see you guys later.